My wife was fired for selling provocative photos online. I was shocked when she used our anniversary picture to attract strangers, and that's when our family fell apart. She blamed me for not giving her a lavish life, but in court, our son said one sentence that silenced the entire room. Welcome to Storytime Reddit, everyone. I'm a 39-year-old man working as a receptionist at a small hotel in the city. My wife, Jessica, is 34 and works as a nurse at a hospital nearby. We've been married for 12 years and have a 10-year-old son named Robert. Our marriage wasn't anything extraordinary, but it wasn't bad either. We didn't have much, often scrambling to make ends meet each month, but we got through it together. Jessica was always the ideal wife, a devoted mother, and above all, a reliable partner through our toughest years. My income as a receptionist wasn't great, so I'd often take on evening shifts at a fast food counter to bring in extra money. Jessica, meanwhile, worked night shifts at the hospital. That meant we rarely saw each other during the week, just the occasional weekend when we both happened to be off. On weekdays, Robert stayed at his grandparents' house until late at night, and once our shifts ended, Jessica and I would go together to pick him up. Life moved in a quiet rhythm. Sometimes it was exhausting, sometimes stressful, but at the end of the day, I was grateful for the peace our little family brought me. I always believed Jessica was a strong woman. She didn't complain much, and she carried her share of the weight through every hardship. There were nights I'd find her fast asleep on the couch, completely drained, and all I could do was gently cover her with a blanket and feel my chest tighten with love and worry. We were both absent parents in many ways, missing out on time with our son, and that guilt often kept me awake. But I kept reminding myself we were doing this for his future, so he could have better opportunities than we ever did. I never expected everything to begin unraveling after something as seemingly harmless as a wedding. Jessica had been invited to her best friend's wedding, a lavish 5-day event at a luxury resort. I was invited too, but I declined because of work and the cost. I wanted to save money, and I figured it would be fine if Jessica went alone. But when she came back, something felt off. She was still the same woman on the outside, same voice, same face, but something in her eyes had changed. Her demeanor was different, and worst of all, the distance between us suddenly felt wider than ever. Jessica grew quiet, often irritable, and avoided even the smallest gestures of closeness. At first, I assumed she was just tired from the trip. I gave her space, didn't push, hoping she'd bounce back in a few days, but instead of fading, the distance only grew. She wasn't warm like before. Her gaze didn't carry the same affection. It felt like she was slowly slipping away from me, and I was powerless to stop it. I was terrified not of a fight, not even of her anger, but of losing the woman I had spent 12 years building a life with. And at that time, I still had no idea that the coldness, the withdrawal, the emotional wall she had built was just the tip of something much, much darker. A betrayal that would shatter my entire world in a single moment. After nearly a week of trying to stay calm, I finally asked Jessica what was going on, why she was so distant and cold. I was hoping for an honest talk. Instead, I got an explosion. It happened at dinner. I had just set our plates down and casually asked what movie she wanted to watch, something light, something familiar. But she just sighed, stared at me coldly, and snapped. She said she regretted marrying me, that all her friends were living in luxury, traveling, wearing designer clothes while she was stuck with a man who couldn't provide. She was tired of pretending to enjoy movie nights when her friends were out at fancy restaurants being showered with gifts. Then she walked off, leaving her half-eaten meal and a silence that hit like a punch to the chest. I didn't argue. I didn't even get mad. I had feared this moment was coming, but I didn't expect it to sting so sharply. I told myself I needed to step up, find more work, make more money. So the next day, I started applying for extra jobs, hoping to turn things around. But Jessica kept changing. She began coming home later, saying she was working overnight shifts at the hospital. Some nights, she wouldn't come home until 4 in the morning. I didn't question it. I just welcomed her home, offered to take care of the house. One night, I reached to hold her, gently, and she pushed me away with this look like I was disgusting. That look hit harder than her words ever could. It got worse. The next morning, she asked for money to buy lingerie. I had some saved, but it was for Robert. I asked if she could wait until payday. She threw the card back at me, called me stingy, said I couldn't even buy my wife underwear. I apologized, panicked, gave her the card again just to avoid another fight. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing happened and walked out the door. But she left her phone behind, and it wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications from an app I didn't recognize. I picked it up, tempted to check, but before I could, she came back, snatched it from my hand, and stormed out again. That was when the doubt started to burn inside me. Later that day, after dropping Robert off with his grandparents, I got a notification from the bank. Over $1,200 was gone. That was our emergency fund money I had saved for our family. I pulled over, heart pounding, and called Jessica. When she got home, I asked where the money went. She didn't deny it. She just started crying and said it was my fault. That she shopped to feel like she wasn't falling behind her friends, and that I had failed to give her the life she deserved. I don't know what happened to her after that wedding she attended, but something changed. Something broke. This wasn't the woman I had married 12 years ago. She wasn't the same person who once stayed up late folding baby clothes or laughed at my corny jokes. She was someone else now. And deep down, I was starting to realize whatever truth I hadn't uncovered yet was going to hurt even more than what I'd just been told. I didn't even know what I was trying to hold on to anymore, but after that fight the other night, I still held out hope that something smallsome moment might bring us back. That day was our wedding anniversary. I remembered everyone, every year, every small gesture that once made her smile. But this year, I said nothing. I pretended to forget because I had a surprise waiting. After dropping Jessica off at the hospital that morning, I went home and got to work. I cleaned our tiny apartment, strung up soft yellow lights, placed a few white Lilisher favorites on the table, and cooked her favorite dishes. It wasn't fancy, but it came from the only thing I still had to give: love. That night, Robert stayed over at his grandparents'. I put on a clean shirt, turned on soft music, and waited at the door like I was 20 again. When Jessica walked in, she looked genuinely surprised. She ran to hug me, smiling, and for a brief second, I believed maybe this could be a turning point. We had dinner by candlelight, talked more than we had in weeks. She said she appreciated the effort, then added that if we had more money, maybe I could have taken her to a real restaurant like her friends' husbands. I forced a smile. She brought up a friend who'd just been gifted a diamond ring, then glanced at her own hand, where her old wedding band sat worn and dull. I swallowed my feelings and told myself not to let it ruin the night. I asked her to take a picture with me. When I tried to post one, she stopped me, said the house looked too cheap. Said she didn't want her friends judging her. That one comment hit harder than anything she'd said before. Everything I had spent the day preparing, every thoughtful detail, meant nothing. It was embarrassing to her. Something to hide. She went into the bedroom, leaving me alone with the weight of that rejection. A few minutes later, she called me in. She was wearing red lingerie, probably what she bought with the money I had been saving for Robert. She asked me to take pictures of her. I did. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what else to do. She looked beautiful, but inside I felt nothing. We were intimate that night, and a part of me still loved her, but deep down I knew this wasn't love anymore. It was just me clinging to a memory of someone who was already gone. The next morning I got a call from Robert's school. He had gotten into a fight. A kid said his mom had been fired from the hospital. I froze. Fired? When? Why hadn't she told me? What had she been doing every night? Where was all our money going? I wasn't ready for the truth yet, not because I didn't want to know, but because I already knew. I just couldn't admit that everything I thought we still had was already gone. After hearing what Robert shared at school, my mind spun with questions I couldn't answer. If Jessica had really been fired, then where had she been going every day for the past month? Where did the money come from? The luxury bags, the perfume, and that nearly $1,000 lipstick I stumbled across? Why didn't she tell me? Why hide it from someone who had always been willing to carry the weight so the rest of the family wouldn't have to? I tried to stay calm, but that night I couldn't sleep. By morning, I knew I couldn't keep living under this fog of doubt. I drove straight to the hospital where Jessica used to work and asked to speak with her. When I introduced myself as her husband, the receptionist looked at me with a mix of hesitation and pity. Then she quietly said Jessica hadn't worked there for over a month. I asked why. She didn't answer, just looked down and shook her head. As I walked out of the hospital, stunned and furious, someone called after me. It was James's mom, Robert's classmate's mother, and also a nurse at the same hospital. She apologized for what her son had said at school, then said there was something I needed to know. She told me that after attending her best friend's wedding, Jessica became obsessed with how miserable and invisible her life felt. What started as casual complaints about money soon escalated into secrecy. She had started using a storage room in the hospital to take provocative pictures and videos. A janitor caught her in the act. He recorded it, and soon the footage leaked throughout the hospital. Jessica was fired immediately. My heart dropped. This woman, who had stood beside me through years of hardship, who once said we'd weather every storm together, had been living a double life right under my nose. James's mom handed me her number and said she'd send me the link to the social media account Jessica had been using. She urged me to act fast before it affected Robert more deeply. I thanked her, barely able to hold it together. On the drive home, I pulled over and just cried, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me to earth. I felt useless. Like I had failed as a husband, failed as a father, failed to protect the family I worked so hard to build. Then a memory hit me. A few weeks ago, while scrolling through social media, I saw a suggested friend pop up an account with a woman in red lingerie turned away from the camera. I brushed it off as clickbait, but now, the body, the pose, the skin tone, it all looked way too familiar. Jessica. It was her. The realization made my stomach turn. That evening, when I got home, I found the living room filled with packaged dresses, shoes, bags from brands I'd only ever seen in magazines. I picked up a receipt and nearly lost it. Lipstick, $920. I asked her where the money came from. She didn't hesitate. She threw things to the ground and screamed that I was the reason she was stuck in this miserable life, that she was done sacrificing for someone who could never give her the life she deserved. I stood there, stunned. I had played dumb for weeks, tried to hold things together, hoped she'd come back to me somehow, but something broke inside me. A voice I could no longer ignore screamed the truth. Jessica had already left this marriage in every way but physically. She had chosen a new life, one that prioritized strangers' attention and fast money over the years we spent building a home together. In that moment, I knew I didn't just lose my wife. I lost the woman who once promised to fight through anything with me, and this time, there would be no turning back. I used to think the most painful moments of my life were losing my parents or the night my son had a dangerously high fever and I couldn't afford to take him to a private clinic. But none of that compared to the moment I logged into the fake account I had just created and accessed the adult platform Jessica had been secretly posting on. It started when her former coworker sent me a link to the profile. The picture was of a woman in red lingerie, turned away from the camera, long hair trailing down her back. The username? Your personal nurse. I didn't even need to click, I already knew it was her. But I had to see it. I had to rip the last thread of hope out of my chest with my own hands. I subscribed. It cost over $200, money I had been saving for Robert's school, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. The page loaded. There she was. Jessica, on full display undressing on camera, posing seductively, eyes full of fake desire. But the worst part? The photos I had taken myself during our anniversary, the ones I thought were just for us. Moments meant to be cherished privately between husband and wife were now being used as bait to lure strangers and make money. My heart shattered. I scrolled through the comments, each one more vulgar than the last. They were objectifying the woman I once admired, once trusted with my whole life. I nearly threw the phone across the room. I felt sick, disgusted, not just with her, but with myself for being so blind. I stormed out of the house and called my brother, who works at a law firm. I didn't even explain. I just said, I want a divorce, now. When I got home, Jessica was gone. All that was left was a note. Don't wait up, I'm on the night shift. A lie. A blatant, pathetic lie. She had been fired for over a month. That night, I lay awake in bed, drowning in silence, staring at the ceiling. My mind kept asking, how could she do this to me? How could she live a double life like this and still look me in the eyes every day? I didn't know what I had done wrong. I only knew that I had loved someone too much, trusted her too completely, and now I was paying the price in pieces of my own self-worth. The next morning, I said nothing. I cleaned the apartment, folded my clothes and Robert's, packed them into a suitcase. I took one last look around. Then I stopped at the wedding photo of her, leaning on my shoulder, smiling like everything was real. But it wasn't. Not anymore. That afternoon, I brought Robert to my parents' place. He didn't ask anything. He just hugged me and quietly said, I don't want mommy yelling at me anymore. That cut deeper than anything Jessica had ever done. That evening, I sat in my brother's office and finalized the divorce paperwork. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I was done. I had all the evidence I needed. I wasn't going to waste another ounce of love or energy on someone who chose strangers' validation over the family we built. From that point on, I let go of every excuse I'd ever made for her. The woman I once loved was gone. All that remained was someone I couldn't even stand to be near, and I knew, in my soul, I could never live under the same roof with her again. The next morning, I woke up in my old bedroom at my parents' house, hoping for a moment of peace after everything that had happened. But Jessica's voice was still in my head like an alarm I couldn't silence. She had been yelling at Robert for touching her expensive makeup. When I walked into the living room, I found my son standing there, eyes down, holding a broken lipstick. Jessica looked at him with cold annoyance, like he was a bother, not her child. I stepped in, pulled her hand away, and told Robert to go to his room. Then I looked at her and asked again, "Where did you get the money to buy all this?" Her expression didn't change. She rolled her eyes and snapped, "Are you deaf or just slow? Why do you keep asking that?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. It wasn't funny. I just couldn't believe she was still pretending to be innocent. "Keep being everybody's personal nurse," I said, "but sign the divorce papers first." Her face went blank for a second like I'd hit her where it hurt. But just as quickly, that familiar, shameless look came back. She collapsed into a chair and started crying, face in her hands. But I felt nothing. I'd seen this performance before. She only cried when she was cornered, never from real remorse. Through her tears, she admitted she felt ashamed watching her friends flaunt designer bags, vacations, and flashy gifts while she was stuck in a small house buying things only when they were discounted. She said she felt invisible. Posting seductive photos gave her attention. People noticed, compliments poured in, money followed. And for the first time in years, she claimed, she felt seen. I told her there's no shame in living a humble life, but there's plenty of shame in selling your body for attention and cash. If that's the life she wanted, I wouldn't stop her. But she had no right to pull our son into that darkness. I told her to think about Robert, about how classmates were already mocking him, about how one day he might stumble across her profile and realize the truth. Did she ever stop to imagine the look on his face? Jessica didn't answer. She just muttered, "It's your fault. You didn't make enough money. I had to find a way to matter." That's when I lost it. "You could have left," I said. "You could have walked away if you were unhappy. But you had no right to betray me or destroy the dignity of this family. That was the end." I packed our bags and took Robert to live with me at my parents' permanently. Jessica hasn't reached out since, not once. She hasn't asked about her own son. And honestly, I'm not surprised. When someone cares more about strangers online than their child, silence is what you expect. I'm not waiting for an apology. I don't want her back. All I want is for my son to grow up in peace, never ashamed of who his mother chose to become. I thought that after leaving with my son, things would finally settle down at least legally. But I was wrong. The storm hadn't passed. Just a few weeks after I filed for divorce, I was served with a countersuit. Jessica and her family were demanding full custody of Robert. I was stunned. Not because I feared losing my son, but because I couldn't believe the audacity. A woman who had abandoned her child, lived a double life, and betrayed our marriage now wanted to play the role of mother? Number. I wasn't going to let that happen. At the first hearing, Jessica's lawyer painted me as an unfit father, a broke, struggling man with no financial stability and no means to raise a child. They created this fantasy where Robert's life would be filled with scarcity if he stayed with me, while his future would be secure if he lived with Jessica and her mother. I sat there listening to them spin lies, using money as their brush to paint over the truth. And Jessica? She sat silently next to them. No defense, no remorse, just silence. I knew staying quiet would cost me everything, so when it was my turn to speak, I brought the truth. No yelling, no drama, just facts. I laid out everything on the table: the adult account Jessica ran, screenshots, transaction history, receipts for her luxury shopping sprees, and a statement from her former coworker at the hospital. I said clearly that any mother who posts explicit content online for money, who even used anniversary photos her husband had taken of her to lure strangers, shouldn't be trusted to raise a child. I talked about how Robert had been bullied at school, mocked by his classmates because of what his mother was doing online. I told them I didn't want my son to grow up feeling ashamed or broken because of mistakes he didn't make. I emphasized that I wasn't trying to keep Jessica away from her son. I just needed a safe, healthy environment for him to grow up in, and Jessica, no matter what her excuses were, couldn't provide that. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. I was granted full custody of Robert. Jessica would only be allowed to see him with my permission and under supervision if necessary. When I walked out of that courtroom, I felt like I had just survived a war. Not because I wanted to win some petty battle, but because I knew I had done what was best for my son. As expected, Jessica's family didn't accept the decision. They blamed me. Said Jessica only did what she did because of stress, because I was inadequate, because I couldn't give her the life she deserved. They recycled every insult I'd heard 100 times during our marriage. But this time, none of it hurt. I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need their forgiveness. All I needed was peace for my son. And when I looked at Robert sleeping peacefully beside me that night, I knew I had made the right choice. I don't have much money. I don't own a fancy house or car. But I have a heart big enough to love and protect my child from the damage of this world. And sometimes, that alone is enough to help a child grow into someone strong, kind, and whole. The divorce was finalized after nearly 3 grueling months of emotional chaos and legal warfare. It felt like crawling through broken glass just to reach the end, but I made it. I walked out of that courthouse as a single father with full legal custody of my son. Jessica didn't even bother showing up for the final signing. She let her lawyer take care of everything, as if our entire life together was just another transaction to file away. No phone call, no message asking how Robert was doing, not even a half-hearted text. And in some strange, bitter way, maybe that silence was a blessing. It confirmed what I had feared for so long, that the woman I once loved was already long gone. After leaving the house that used to be our home, Robert and I moved into my parents' place. It's small. The walls are thin and the floor creaks in the hallway, and the water heater has a personality of its own, but it's peaceful. For the first time in years, we didn't have to walk on eggshells or pretend everything was fine. Robert went back to school, and slowly, I began to notice the changes. He smiled more. He laughed at cartoons again. He stopped shrinking into himself every time someone said his mom's name. The fear that used to hang over him like a storm cloud was starting to clear. That alone made everything worth it. I picked up extra shifts working nights, weekends, whatever I could get. It was exhausting, sure, but it was the kind of tired that made me feel alive, like every ounce of effort had meaning. No more coming home to fake smiles and cold stares, no more pretending, just honest work and the quiet pride of being there for my son. One evening, while helping Robert with his homework, I saw him slip a photo into his drawer. Curious, I asked him about it. He showed me the picture us at the park, mid-laugh, ice cream dripping down his shirt. I asked why he kept it so carefully. And he whispered, almost like it was a secret, "Because this is my real family." My throat tightened. I couldn't say a word. I just pulled him into my arms and held him close. As for Jessica, I still hear about her sometimes. People send me links or screenshots her trying to become some kind of influencer, still active on adult platforms, selling the illusion of a perfect life to strangers online. But I don't feel anger anymore. Not even sadness, just nothing. She chose that life, and I've chosen mine. She picked fleeting validation over lasting love, the empty spotlight over the warm light of a home. And now, I've turned the page for good. I'm not chasing anyone, I'm not trying to fill a void. I'm just building something real alone day at a time with the one person who never gave up on me. My son. I'm not rich, I don't have prestige, but I have love, I have truth. And in this new life, that's more than enough.